Without any further ado, we'd like to welcome the first speaker from Side Proposition, Kekezo Smith.
Panel, the reason why the term or the phrase "I'm just a girl" became so popular, and I quite literally use it every day in my own life, is because it was an understanding of the idea that women can't always be the big CEO, the top achiever in the spaces that they exist in. We think the mediocre life allows people to access success, and we think that's something that we're going to fundamentally propose in today's debate. We're very happy to propose. Our stance is that we think the narrative of glorifying the mediocre life is something that is going to support the average person, and thus we all support it. Cool. Some points of setup before we get into some argumentation. So, firstly, under context, setup here. That is to say, firstly, the idea of what the mediocre life looks like. So this is just you being the average individual, the average person in your space. So you get a job, but you're not the CEO in that position. You do well in school, but you're not the top, 1% student in the country. You're just living your average life. That also means that you're not going to be performing at the worst. You're not going to be the worst individual in these spaces. We think you find middle ground and you just exist as an average individual, as a normal person. How the glorification of this life then exists is that we think it's going to look like things like news or media, not taken, news or media, or just a general focus on these individuals who are living an average and normal livelihood. We think then our opposition, what they have to defend is people chasing successful livelihoods and chasing things such as hustle culture and trying to be the top performers in the fields and spaces that they exist in, because we think, well, obviously, as a society, always going to want to validate and glorify something, and we think this is going to likely look like success, because we don't think people are going to want to glorify things that are like that people that are performing bad in society. So it's likely going to look like people glorifying people who are successful individuals. Cool. My case, but then is two things. So I'm going to give you an argument, firstly, as to why we think we achieve a more accessible standard of success, and secondly, talking about how we achieve more happiness for people, and that's very important in this debate. Before I get into my argumentation, I'll take a POI.
Do you support Kendrick Lamar using his successful platform to promote black issues?
We don't think that you have to be the top 1% to promote the idea of like blackness or specific issues that you think are important in society. We think that can exist within the average person. The average black person can talk about issues in the black community. We don't think that's going to be something that has to uniquely come from the 1% individual. But also note that Kendrick Lamar is an extremely privileged individual. So that means that his narrative and his narrative of those like issues is coming from a privileged space and a privileged perspective. We don't think that's necessarily inherently valuable. Cool. My argument then is to firstly why we think we achieve a more accessible standard of success. So we think important context here is to contextualize where we think this glorification comes from initially in society, where we glorify successful individuals and things like that. So we think this comes from two places. First, we think it comes from successful individuals themselves. So this looks like just successful individuals in their fields talking about how, or validating and justifying why they worked as hard as they did to get to these specific successful places. So this looks like them having books or documentaries or just movies or things like that that document their success and all the hard work that they do. We think the second place this comes from is largely going to be from Western media, specifically because they dominate the spaces that we exist in society. They dominate pop culture, and we think we think then they perpetuate those sort of ideas. And we think two things to note about this uniquely is firstly that we think this is going to be from the most elite position, so like the white man going to be talking about what success looks like. But secondly, we think this is likely going to be a push for sensationalism to make sure that people engage with that idea of success, because media always wants to get the most buy-in from consumers. It's going to be a sensational sort of thing in society. Cool. Given that context then, the importance then is to say that we think where this glorification comes from of like success largely comes from people who who are out of touch in the space and people who are in the most privileged spaces in society. Cool. There's a multitude of reasons then, given that context, as to why we think this creates an inaccessible standard of what success looks like. So first, we think it relies on money and resources. So if you don't have the money to get a tutor to do well in school, or you don't have the money to get the best coaches like Bella in your spaces, we don't think you're actually going to have the ability to achieve that success. Secondly, we think that if you don't have a good support system around you, because we think often journeying into journeys of success means that you're going to have to face lots of difficult times, difficult processes, and if you don't have an adequate support system to back you in that journey, we don't think you're going to likely be able to access that standard of success. Thirdly, we think it's going to look like confidence in yourself. If you're a minority group, for example, a black queer woman, and people have been telling you about how these groups in particular are incapable in society or should be, or just like less capable than other individuals, we think that has a significant impact on your confidence and your ability to be confident in the spaces that you exist in to access that success. Fourthly, we think it looks like you not having access to connections and networking and being able to like have connections to someone who exists in a higher space than you. We think those are things that not everybody has in society. But fifthly, then we think just having time. We think not everybody has the ability to like deprioritize their family and not pay things such as black tax. We think time is something that is uniquely something that not everybody has and is a privilege in and of itself, and if you don't have that, we think you're not going to be successful. So we think this proves to you in a multitude of ways of why this is inaccessible as a standard for success. So comparatively then on our side, when we normalize or when we have a glorification of mediocre life, we think that means that what this goes to show is that like under their side, we think there's significant pressure and you're not able to actually go beyond the mediocre life. But we think on our side, what we allow is that the majority of people who exist as average individuals feel that they can actually access that success, which is important because it's unfair to put those unfair standards on people. Cool. My second argument then as to why we think we achieve more happiness on our side. So we think here is to firstly say that people are always going to want to constantly chase achievement, even if they're not going to likely succeed in those spaces, like Kez in the final, for example. So we think that at the point at which people are constantly going to be chasing this desire to be happy, we think that then means that you're going to have to, we think this then, you don't get happiness in two ways. Firstly, we think you can't find happiness in the spaces that you exist in. So that is to say, I come to debating not to have fun and have cool chats with people, but I come to debating thinking about the trophy, thinking about the win that I'm going to have. And that puts extreme amount of pressure and less enjoyment in those spaces. Secondly is to say that we think the happiness that you do achieve is not actually valuable because you feel like you can always do better. You don't actually feel like validated in that happiness in and of itself. So we think that then just means that your happiness is you don't find fulfillment in the things that you do, and that's harmful. Comparatively on our side, when we have the glorification, we think that people are able to find happiness in just being average in themselves and actually enjoying the activities that they participate in. Cool. Second point under that is to say that we think you don't actually get happiness because we think that you instead of chasing like technical success, which is things like the trophy and things like that, you're going to likely direct that energy into chasing things that are like less tangible. So things like relationships, like my relationship with Laura. We think at the point at which that success isn't contingent on you being the most successful in that space, and it's not contingent on things that you can't control yourself. We think you're likely going to have a more longer-lasting happiness, but more fulfillment. Panel, we're all just girls at the end of the day. We should all be able to exist as just girls. Side with proposition.
This microphone's doing weird things.
We'd like to thank that speaker. I think it's about to mention, please keep your phones on silent as well, so that it rings. Speakers, please hold the mic up to your mouth when you're taking POIs. So that it's just more audible. All right. We'd like to thank the first speaker from Proposition, and we'd now like to call on the first speaker from Opposition 1.
Where's the wand? Oh, it's here.
Okay, is it right if I took like this? Or from like this? I don't know. I'm not used to mics. Cool. A little girl in a village outside of Gongwe in Eastern Cape has limited access to education and quality institutions. Most of her free time is spent between doing chores for her brothers and pondering where her next meal is coming from. By all measures, she's cooked. But because of an ideal, a strong belief that she can do more and that she can achieve more than she presently has in her life, she's able to get herself educated, to earn money, to send her children to Model C schools. That woman is my mother. That child is every minority student who's able to go to institutions like Parktown, like King Edward. We must agree that we deserve more. What is our stance within this debate? Firstly, we support the glorification of conventional success. We don't support the glorification of a mediocre lifestyle. What does conventional success look like? It may look like things like getting a job, starting a business, or winning awards, or maybe speaking at a SACEE final. But what is conventional success not? I think conventional success is not a restrictive guideline on how to live your life. For one major reason, the appeal to the idea of conventional success is that, well, it's appealing. So this is to say that people adapt this idea into whatever they find appealing to themselves and whatever they genuinely desire and look at as a standard for success. Understand, this is a direct response to the idea about success being inaccessible, success making you unhappy. It can be your own view, your own spectrum of what success looks like.
PY.
What's the alternative that they have to support on their side? They have to support. Oh, no. Second point of stance is that what does glorification actually look like? I think glorification looks like a strong idea that exists towards society that empowers individuals to go for it, to do that thing you want to do, to strive for that success. But secondly, it looks like a major part is idolizing the pursuit itself. So not necessarily the achievement of success, but the fact that you're on your grind, or the fact that you're working hard, or you're enjoying the process. This is to say that even if you fail, even if it's inaccessible, even if you may fail, you still can derive happiness from adhering to this ideal. What's the alternative that they have to support? They have to support the glorification of a mediocre lifestyle. That looks like hyper optimism about just the blandness and disappointment of the staleness of your life. But also, what does that glorification look like on their side especially? It oftentimes looks like trying to demonize other lifestyles. This is because people inherently by nature want things. You want to do more, you want to succeed. So in order to counteract that, and in order to be okay with the mediocre lifestyle, you have to actively detract from the appeal of those other forms of lifestyle. So you have to say things like rich people are greedy, or you have to say things like, it's not all that great to have all that money. That means that on their side, they're necessarily creating a disconnect between these two people, and that's why that POI I asked in the first was important, because you're not going to have Kendrick Lamar using his success to appeal to poorer people when they look at him and say things like, oh, he's probably greedy or whatever else that it is. An important part of framing within this debate, understand that disappointment is something we're willing to trade off on our side for two major reasons. One, like I said earlier, you glorify the process, so if you did get disappointed, it's all right. But secondly, we think oftentimes people are more hurt by regret than disappointment. The fact that you didn't go for it is what's going to linger with you when you're on your deathbed, rather than the fact that you went for it and failed. Three questions then that decide who wins this debate. Firstly, who's able to achieve a better quality of life? Secondly, who's able to get better societal progression, particularly for minorities? And thirdly, in a mere speech, who's more inclusive of different ways to live your life. But before that, sure.
It is better to demonize people who are able to be successful and who have privilege than to, by your exact same analysis, making it symmetric, than to demonize people who are just trying to live their lives. Yeah, see, that response doesn't stand because I told you what glorification of a successful lifestyle looks like. It doesn't look like demonizing poor people because you still value the pursuit, you still value the process. So even if you're not there, you still embody the qualities of that pursuit, you still value the qualities of the rhetoric. So few direct responses before I head into argumentation. You give us a few ideas. First is that success is inaccessible. You largely responded to this, but you think success becomes even more achievable and more accessible when you have a bunch of people working towards that success. So sure, a queer black woman is unlikely to be able to do much. But a bunch of queer black women are able to do things like create BEE and affirmative action that uplifts them and makes that success more accessible. That happens when you have a collective idea that tells them that they can't do such things. The next major idea is that pursuit, trying to be successful detracts from your individual happiness. We really primarily responded to this. You can still be happy with the pursuit. First argument then about why we on our side are better for the quality of life of these individuals. The first reason is that we encourage the pursuit of bigger things in your life.
you become empowered by the idea of possibility. This is extremely important, particularly for marginalized people who don't have access to good education, who don't have good institutions around them, and who don't have good role models who they can look to. For these individuals, there's nothing else that's going to give them that empowerment. There's nothing else that's going to give them that support. They do need some level, they do need this ideology. They do need some level of delusion to be able to actually pursue their goals. The impact of all of this is to say that on our side, we get people who are better capable or better trust their own capabilities to be able to do things. So even if they don't necessarily reach the top position and the top level of success, you feel the cliche, shoot for the moon, lying amongst the stars. The second reason about why we better like these people's quality of life is because institutions that are around them are incentivized to create uplifting structures. This is because these institutions want to be associated with the idea of glory, of like having this ideal that people who come to these institutions are able to be successful and reach that glorified ideal. So this looks like universities having alumni programs that support people to find jobs. It looks like things like old boy society or old girl societies that assist people who go to the institutions. This means that people are able then, just by the mere fact that they want to pursue something, just the mere fact that they want to go for it, are able to get and land up in a system that supports them and enables them to do so. My second argument then about why you get better progression for minorities on our side. The first reason is that you put larger pressure on suppressive system. This is because you make these individuals engage with those systems more, and as the more they engage with it, the more they become disillusioned with the idea of how well they function. So when you're a black queer woman and you try to go to university and get rejected for no good reason, then you now clearly see the discrimination and the oppression that exists within society. You're more incentivized to fight back against that discrimination. You're more incentivized to do things like stop BE, as I mentioned earlier. Think about how, like, American citizens in the USA, their obsession with the American dream means that they're able to do things like hold politicians accountable when they make their American dream inaccessible. But the second way that we're better for minorities is because of, it's like, understand minority people are people who do things like remittances, people who do things like find opportunities for your fellow family members. So when you have even just one successful individual who benefits from this glorification, you're able to uplift a whole bunch of more people. Okay, time.
We'd like to thank the first speaker from opposition. We'd now like to call on the second speaker from proposition, Amara Patel.
Just a second.
So if you're not getting like distinctions at school, you're not gonna get the like scholarship to get into whatever you have. So that was fast 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Shame. Prep was rough. Osiyama had to keep on sneaking up and listening to our case when we were doing prep. But that doesn't excuse the bad strategy that they have on their side. The clear, glaring strategic flaw on their side is that they confuse having to succeed with actually the idea that you can succeed within your individual capacity. I'll be quickly going through some strategic clarity, disproving their argument, and then moving on to my argument where I take cares at their best case and show you how relationships on their side are much more toxic than we have on our side. Let's quickly go on strategy and why they're losing on this debate. We think that what they fail to understand is that the difference, or what glorification does, is that it causes people to crave validation as a person. So that looks like you having to succeed. It doesn't matter what the process is. It doesn't matter what you go through. It's literally just determined on the outcome and what happens. It's if you make it through, then you succeed. If not, you're a failure. That means that you are actually demonizing the poor as much as you don't want to, because at the point where they aren't actually succeeding, or the point where they aren't getting all of these accolades, that's when they're failing, that's when they look down upon, that's when they can't get validation in this debate. So that means that the Eastern Cape girl on their side can still believe in herself on our side, because she still has the confidence in herself that she can succeed. She doesn't feel like she has to succeed and that there's a pressure to succeed. Secondly, we think that demonization exists on their side. But we think that even if demonization existed on our side, we think it's better on our side. Because who are we demonizing on our side? We're demonizing the rich people that have influence, that are able to absorb that kind of shock, that can take this kind of thing. Whereas on their side, they're harming and demonizing the majority of people. Because most people aren't going to come first in the grade. Most people are going to work a 9 to 5. We think that it's fine if you demonize the rich, because we're accounting for the majority in this debate. But thirdly, we think that we still are able to get confidence on our side, because you're not knocked down after a failure, because you feel like you don't have to constantly succeed. You do something, you fail, okay, fine, we move on. It's not that you try and you've literally, your worth is based on success, and you miss that, now you fail, now you're done. The importance of this is, one, on a strategic level, we're the side that is truer to this debate, but two, even just based on this example, we're still winning, we're able to claim the benefit, we're the side that's winning this debate so far. Moving on to the argument where they tell us that institutions are able to help people, and you're able to fight harder because of that. Firstly, I think that means that it's more of a blame onto yourself if you fail, because you've been given all of the resources, you've been given time, effort has been pumped into you, and still you fail. That's something that's harder to take as a person. That's something that makes you feel bad and makes you feel like you aren't worthy of success. But secondly, you have to meet requirements to get there. So KK's analysis about being a poor person in a rural community or not having access to that kind of thing still applies, because getting that university bursary still requires you to have some sort of skills that not everyone is able to get. But thirdly, we think that discrimination on their side doesn't, we think that we are able to still have fruitful conversations about discrimination. You don't have to be a big successful public figure to actually have chats about discrimination. But moreover, if there are still people that succeed on our side of the house, we think that we still can claim those benefits. It was a weird argument for them to run on their side. The impact of this is twofold. One, if institutions aren't able to help a majority of people, then it doesn't matter whether or not they are there. It's the fact that you're not going to get the benefits on their side. But secondly, I'm just so happy right now that we're winning already. Cool. Let's just quickly bring back some matter that KK was able to that was ignored on their side. We told you that we are able to get greater amounts of happiness on our side. One, because you feel like you don't have to constantly fight to do better. Because if I'm being in the final right now, that's enough. It doesn't matter if I succeed. It's been a hard journey. It's been a great tournament. It's been fun. But secondly, because you're able to invest energy somewhere else, it looks like you're not having to focus on success. I can do my hobbies. I can paint. I can do all of those things. These things are much more fulfilling. Maybe it's not the standard typical measure of success, but they're long lasting and they're able to benefit me. Cool. Based on that then, our match is still standing, we're winning this debate. Moving on to my argument, where I'm going to take care that the best case, where they want success, but how they then shoot themselves in the foot and are counterproductive to success on their side. Cool. Yeah.
Surely if these individuals are highly successful and they're highly influential, they can't be the same effect as having regular people trying to spread the same message. And surely you can't support demonizing.
Okay, cool. These people still exist in our world. We think we're able to still see them as greedy people. We can still see them as the reality that they are, that they're putting their views out onto everyone. We think that we can still have them talk about social issues on their side, but we don't have to tell people that they have to be like that in order to get success. Cool. What is then, when success is glorified, what does it look like in their world? One, it looks like success literally being the end goal. Two, it looks like you're having to reach that standard. And three, it looks like the glorification, putting pressure on you to be on that because it's literally the focus in society. This causes immense stress for 3 reasons. 1, because you're focusing on the goal and not the process of actually getting there. That looks like Molemo telling us that we're like hate ourselves for mediocrity and we're stumbling in the quarters even though we were focusing on the final. But secondly, it looks like if you achieve success, you have to get it to it again. That looks like if I win this tournament, then there's pressure from everyone in this room for me to win it again. But thirdly, because it looks like structures become so much more overwhelming. Because when you enter the school building, it isn't just entering the school building. It's a place where you can't slack, where you have to give it your best, where everything you do has immense consequences. Therefore, the impact of this is 2 things. 1, you're unlikely to get, you're more likely to be absorbed in fear and the fear of failing that. But 2, you aren't actually able to succeed in general because you're just so scared and you fumble and you make mistakes because the stress of the exam and the stake of the exam is doubled. We think that mediocrity is far better on the side because you see exams for what they are. You rationalize it and you don't see it as overwhelming. You see it as, perhaps you see it as a little bit stressful, but you don't see it as something that can validate your entire worth and that kind of thing. This argument was important because it caters for the majority of people that struggle to get that kind of success. But secondly, I think that we get relationships that are tainted on their side. We think that what people end up having to do is 1, they become hyper competitive because the people around you are seen as in the way of your goal instead of just people, instead of like potential friendships. But 2, you can't engage with friendships in the way that you want to. You're engaging with them as a means to success. That looks like you becoming friends with your enemies so that you get better, so that you know that they are behind you, that kind of thing. This is not valuable for a few reasons. 1, because we as people crave genuine social connections. Maybe they don't understand it, but it's very important for people to have genuine relationships and not seeing people as barriers in their goals. But 2, we think that we like othering them and or like seeing them as obstacles isn't something that's going to actually allow you to grow as people, because people are like important for people crave like connection. We think that as a girl, we stand against feminine competition. We stand against that toxicity. In the end, I'm just a girl and we're winning.
I have a new intro.
We'd like to thank the second speaker from Proposition and call on the second speaker from Opposition, Amir.
Can everyone hear me like this? Oh. Can everyone hear me like this? Okay. Glorifying mediocrity is a gross narrative that heinously constricts people into an oppressive bubble. We pop that bubble and allow individuals to shimmer and shine. By the way, the names of Parktown teams are shimmer and shine. That's the joke. Anyway, 3 strategic issues. Firstly, on strategy. Secondly, on the principle of minorities. And thirdly, on who's best for improving the quality of people's lives. And then I'll bring you an argument on why you limit people's autonomy. Firstly, on strategy. 1, they say that people on their side will always, people on our side will always strive to be the top 1% because that's how the narrative is going to look like on our side. We think that's an uncharitable burden on us. This is because success is a subjective concept because it's based on people's individual goals within their particular genre. I.e., if your goal is simply to become a senior manager as opposed to the CEO, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be pressured into becoming in the top 1%. That's important because they burden us to prove why everybody has to be in the top 1%. Success can exist on a spectrum. Secondly, we don't have to demonize unsuccessful people on our side. This is because part of our narrative is glorifying success, is glorifying the path to success. And the reason for this is because in order to make successful people seem powerful and good within society, you need to show how they got to that point and what challenges that they had to overcome. Which means that in order to effectively glorify success on our side, you also need to glorify the path to success. Importantly, this means when people fail on our side, or they won't be demonized or feel bad about that failure, because you can still relate to successful people's struggles, since we also glorify the path to success. I.e., Oprah Winfrey saying in interviews that she was a victim of domestic abuse is her like sharing her successful story that also motivates people and shows people that even if you fail in life, it's not okay. Thirdly and finally, I just want to take down Amara's argument about competition. Two responses. One, we think that competition often enhances relationships because you tend to push other people to achieve more and you get closer to those individuals. But secondly, we think that competition is inherently a good thing because it acts as an incentive for people to do better, and consequently they're able to improve the quality of their life. On the first clash then, on minorities, what did they tell us? They say they create an accessible standard and they give us 2 points of framing. One, that the narrative on our side is perpetuated by Western media, but two, the narrative is perpetuated by elite politicians. Two responses to this idea. One, this is untrue because on our side, this narrative supports the glorification of any form of success. Importantly, success exists on a spectrum, so we aren't just going to be glorifying like successful Westerners who control the media regarding what success looks like. We're going to be glorifying people from all from all walks of life, people from developing nations, people of color who overcame like major barriers. It was uncharitable for them to say it's only Western media. But secondly, this is just not mutually exclusive because the people on their side who are in control of this media, and Proposition concedes that they're going to use media for this glorification, are elitist people, are people in elite circles. So for them to say that our narrative is propagated by elitist politicians and like elite circles, that's false. It's at best it's like symmetric on either side. But moreover, we think elites are the ones who have an incentive to promote their narrative of mediocrity because on their side, in order to keep elite circles exclusive, which elite people want inherently, they're going to promote this narrative of mediocrity in order to prevent people from coming into their spaces because elite people like the exclusivity of being in upper class circles. Therefore, that harm is like still exists on their side. But let's engage with what they told us under this principle. They tell us that it's essentially inaccessible and it's particularly bad for minorities. On their side, they're better for helping people become successful. A bunch of responses. One, Luongo's argument directly disputed this. He said two things. One, that we get more pressure on governments because when minorities or people in impoverished circles strive for success, you have more people trying to overcome barriers, and governments consequently have an incentive to change these structures that make success inaccessible. But secondly, in instances where minorities do become successful, they are able to uplift other minorities. We gave you the POI about Kendrick Lamar using his platform to promote success. A few new responses from my side. One, on our side, on their side, governments will circumvent accountability. This is because on Proposition side, governments will abuse their narrative to justify oppressive laws that bar minorities from success, i.e. saying that the reason why people of color are unsuccessful is because of this narrative of like being mediocre and pursuing a mediocre lifestyle, as opposed to like taking accountability for the fact that their like racist economic policies are barring minorities, which means governments can use their narrative and weaponize it to their benefit. Secondly, we get more scrutiny on oppressive policies that make things inaccessible. And this is because when you glorify the success of individuals, that also means glorifying their path to success, like I stated in my strategy clash, therefore shining light on the barriers that these individuals had to overcome, i.e. shining light on like challenges that famous music artists had to overcome and like economic policies that barred them from gaining a level of success, which means we're comparatively better for access because it means that we actually get more accountability for these oppressive policies that make it inaccessible. But thirdly, the logical conclusion of Proposition's case is that if you can't achieve something, you ought not work hard. Principally, that's a very abhorrent thing because you essentially tell people that they should be complicit in oppression and complicit in mediocrity as opposed to like rebelling against these systems. I.e., imagine telling apartheid freedom fighters that they should not rebel because, hey, they're just going to get arrested and the likelihood of their success is just not going to happen. That's the principal conclusion of their case. I think that's just an abhorrent principle. Cool. Onto the second clash then on the quality of lifestyles. They say people will always chase happiness. People will always chase happiness, and this is bad. One, because you're only focused on getting trophies and don't like pursue relationships with other people. Three responses. One, this is untrue. Just because success is your priority, it doesn't mean you can't like achieve things on the sideline in your pursuit of success. Because we think it's symmetric on either side that you're going to meet new people in your pursuit to success, and therefore you can still make meaningful relationships. But secondly, their side is worse for pursuing things. Like external relationships. Because once you settle at mediocrity, it means all of the benefits that exist past mediocrity you can't get. So when Amara says that like if they were in the finals, they'd just be content with the finals. You wouldn't be in the finals in the first place if you didn't have this narrative, but also if they're content with just being in the finals, give this win to opposition. Finally, they tell us that you don't get validated in your happiness. We think it's actually the opposite. When you're constantly striving for more, your life is ever changing and there's more novelty within your life. On their side, life becomes mundane and monotonous because you settle at mediocrity. So there's no changes within your life, there's no new things for you to experience. On our side, the constant pursuit of success and the constant chasing of happiness is good. Finally, under this clash, I just want to bring an extension of autonomy. And this is to say, as per the info slide, a mediocre lifestyle is considered plain and ordinary. Crucially, this perception of what constitutes an ordinary lifestyle is based on the norms of that current society, i.e. working a 9-to-5 job. This is bad, one, because it means that jobs that fall out of what an ordinary lifestyle is, or what don't constitute an ordinary lifestyle, are shun out because they don't meet the standard of a mediocre lifestyle. This means you are confined into specific paths. So it looks like MLK getting backlash for like not pursuing a law degree and instead going into like social justice. Therefore, your side limits the autonomy of people to pursue unordinary jobs. I don't know what's worse, having a mediocre lifestyle or having a mediocre case. Thankfully, KES doesn't meet any of those criteria.
We'd like to thank the second speaker from opposition. We'd now like to call on the third speaker from proposition, Laura Hayes.
Okay, is this audible? Okay, is that better? Okay, cool. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. I would have thought KES would have been thrilled to glorify mediocrity because it's clearly the only way that they or their case could ever feature in this debate. I think it's clear. I can see all of you falling asleep. Let's actually talk about where this debate was going to win. So before I get into 3 clashes, 1, where do we have a fairer standard of success? 2, how do we better achieve the basics and the things that people just need to survive? And 3, where do we have better happiness? Let's quickly clarify what the comparative that KES actually needed to defend was. Right, so they start off by taking a really soft line and they say, we're defending the whole pursuit of success. It's the whole journey. It's so cute, guys. We're not just actually defending success, which is what they said they're going to do in the first place. Then they try to back that up and they say that it's fair. We can defend the whole pursuit of success and not demonize the people who fail. A couple of responses to this and why this was never the line that they could take. Firstly, because success and the people that we all agree who propagate it, the people who are successful, because that relies on being unique. To be successful, you have to be the winner. You have to be the CEO. You have to be the best. That means that you can't glorify everyone and everything they do because then you lose your power and then you lose the social standing that you literally created this whole narrative for. It was never going to work. They had to defend those few people succeeding. They couldn't try to be cute and like fuzzy and include everyone. But secondly, we think that the narrative of the fact that you should be successful and you should strive for that has to rely on the fact that you can be successful. But when you're constantly like glorifying people who failed and you're glorifying people who tried and then couldn't actually achieve that, then you undermine your own narrative in the first place, which is why it was never going to be sustainable for them to support that kind of thing. Thirdly, Amir tries to defend this by saying, oh no, people need to explain how they got there in order to be seen as legitimate. I think even then that doesn't stand because you're only glorifying the very few journeys who were actually successful. You're not showing what actual failure looks like. Even their response is a cop out of what their burden was supposed to be. They took a soft line by saying that they're defending everyone. Let's not be fooled. Let's understand they're defending the white men who can succeed. They're not defending the people and they're not standing for them. Shame on them. First clash then. Where do we have a fairer standard of success? Sit down. I want to clarify firstly why this is such an important path to victory because it's gone severely under-responded to. We think, regardless of the incentives that narratives should set, they ought to represent people in the very first place. So before we get to their chats on, make people delusional, so maybe one or two of them should succeed, we think just in the first place, these standards that we set ought to represent what the average person can achieve, because otherwise it's just a really unfair standard. We can analogize this fairness to including everyone to like every other sphere in society, but I think politics is maybe the most obvious one. The decisions that affect like a vast majority of people ought to include the vast majority of those people. That's intuitively important. We told you then, very importantly, that most people can't succeed, and this response is, and this matter has gone largely unresponded to, so I won't repeat it, but Keke told you about money, the confidence of a mediocre white man that most people can't have, the time, the connections, all of those kinds of things. What do they say here? No. They say, oh no, success is objective because you can set your own goals. Cool, you can set your own goals, Kez, as an individual, but when we're talking about mass society narratives that say you need to be successful, you don't get to set, as an individual, what those standards look like. They come from what people generally agree is successful. They come from what the media agrees is generally successful. That does look like the movies that we make about the CEOs. It looks like the Instagram posts with your gold medal. Look at me, I'm the GOAT. It was worth all the hard work. It comes from those people at the top. It comes from our general understanding of success, which means that we are excluding the vast majority of people that they claim to be caring for on their side. We don't think they can say that success is objective in the context of this narrative, although that may be true for one or two of them. But secondly, we think it's just objectively true that they defend status quo, or at least the vast majority of status quo, where this is the narrative where they do defend hustle culture and where that is the reality. What this means is that they are defending the kinds of toxic narratives that they claim to go against. They are defending the athletes and the CEOs and those toxic narratives being on top. They can't try to say that they would change it because they don't understand why they have any mechanism in order to do so. What this means is that we conclude that the standard of success is actually rather unfair. When we tell you that standards ought to include and narratives ought to include the people that they are forced upon, then we think this is a clear path to victory and something they're unable to touch. Second clash, how do we achieve the basics, the social mobility, the things that you need in order to survive? So a couple of things here. Let's firstly talk about motivation in order to achieve those things in the first place, because that is the biggest push and basically their only mechanism in this whole clash. So a couple of responses here. Firstly, we think we need to bring in a more nuanced understanding of human motivation, because what they say is you need motivation to get food on the table and to push for social change, so we have to be motivated to achieve success. Understand that different needs come from different situations, and we can derive different motivations from those, right? So I don't think I need to feel like I need to succeed to be the CEO in order to feel like I need to work for my family so I can put food on the table. That's a different motivation. It's not what this debate is about. Similarly, the need for equality and social mobility. It is different to feel like I need to win this debate versus I need to not be called a slur while I'm doing this debate. The need to feel like you belong and the need to feel like you have social mobility are entirely different things to success. Kez loses because they group them all together. They say, let's succeed, let's just hope for the best, tell people to do things but never actually tell them what to do. But secondly, I want to point out that if they claim that these needs and these problems are so severe, then they're probably going to override what society tells you to do. People will probably push for them anyways. So I don't think they can claim that their problem is as severe in the first place. No. Secondly, Amar gives you a really important argument about how it's more difficult or how it's more unlikely that you're going to be productive and you're going to succeed in the first place. So when we take them at their best case and we say, sure, maybe people do need to succeed, they need to go places, when she gives you a whole argument with 4 layers as to how you're not going to do that, and their only response is you push people to be better with competition, when they never actually engage with the nuance of that, we think they undermine their own case because we took them at their best there. But finally, they say that in order to be that they make institutions become more inclusive because, like the government, like universities was their other example. 2 things. Firstly, I think these institutions still rely on support in the first place. You still want votes, you still want people to come to your university, so you can't be terrible. I don't know what kind of world they're living in. But secondly, it's far easier for those institutions to cop out on their side when they glorify hustle culture, when they glorify you do the work, you go be successful, you go get your bread, you go get your bread or whatever. That's when they don't have to give you that help. That's when they can cop out of it. So if they care about actually enabling people to succeed, then I think this clash is also vastly falling to us. But I want to lastly touch on the thing that they didn't touch on at all, which is the idea of happiness regardless. We told you that when you set the standard at a place where most people can achieve it, then most people can feel like they fit in, can feel like they are validated by society. On their side, it's never enough. You're you're always fighting to be better because that is what you feel like you're forced to do. On our side, we have firstly certain happiness, but secondly, we think this is a really big impact because it affects the way that you see the world. So even if they're able to be successful, even if they somehow win this debate, we had fun, we made memories, we made friends, and that's what's important. We think it's very clear. Stand with girl.
All right, we'd like to thank the third speaker from Proposition, and we'd now like to call on the third speaker from Opposition, SACEE.
Is it fine if I speak like this? Is this good? Okay, perfect. In the ghettos of the Bronx or the favelas of Brazil, it is quite obvious that there are increased barriers against certain individuals and the working class. There are supposed caps on how much they can move up the monetary ladder. The response and the narrative that has been built up is one of complacency and the aversion of risk, instead of indignation. That is unacceptable, because the son or the daughter of an immigrant with the very little opportunities he or she has should be taking every single one to the fullest extent. That's what we showed you through the entirety of our case. I'm going to answer 3 questions in this speech. 1, which team actually understood what this debate was about? 2, which team is better for happiness? Thirdly, which team is better for minorities? First question on strategy. What did we tell you in Longo's speech? We told you we're not willing to support the glorification of a mediocre life. What does this glorification look like? What did they have to defend? 1, a hyper-optimism and seeing the positives in a normal and average life. 2, it is a tool for complacency and suppressing the individual desires people have. Thirdly, it is individuals not taking risks and not taking things like opportunities because they don't want to either have a significant success or a significant failure. Lastly, they have to have the demonization of the rich in order to do this. And the reason for this is because they have to overcome the social inertia that has painted success as a historically good thing. That's the reason as to why demonization is unique to their side. But furthermore, what do they tell you? They tell you that demonization is okay because rich people are inherently bad people. Like, that's just not true, right? There are various rich individuals that come from impoverished backgrounds or minority backgrounds. Like, Oprah Winfrey shouldn't be demonized because she has a lot of money. That's just something that's absurd. Second part I want to talk about here. They tell you that we are likely to demonize individuals that are average and middle class on our side. That's not true. The first reason is because poor individuals and working class individuals are generally sympathetic actors. No one's going to demonize a person that's doing their best. No one's going to demonize a person that has an average job. But secondly, even if this was true, it's likely that that can be a good thing because it's a social pressure to do better. It's something that's not inherently bad in and of itself. Second thing I want to talk about here is what the comparative on opposition is. We told you that on our side, 3 things are likely. 1, individuals are likely to pursue success because there's an inspiration to do so. The reason for this is because success is painted as a good thing. Note, however, that success can be very nuanced in its nature. So you can have individuals that want to start a family. You can have individuals that want to work a corporate job. You can have individuals that just want to travel. The reason as to why this is the second thing that we told you is that you're likely to glorify the pursuit of that success. And the third thing we told you is that it's likely that you're glorifying the process. Laura's response is to say that you cannot glorify the failures, so you're likely to demonize poor individuals in that regard. That's not true, because the reason as to why you can glorify hardships as well is because when you glorify success, you glorify that that person went through those hardships in the very first place. So the reason as to why Oprah Winfrey is an influential figure is because she is black and she faced the hardships of being a black woman in like getting that money in the first place. That's especially important because it's likely then that we can have the glorification of hardships as well. It's likely to be a motivating factor for individuals to get up and get again. Lastly, they tell you that people have to be the top 1% on our side, and that's a bad thing because the glorification can only offer to a few individuals. That's not true, because success doesn't have to be comparative in its nature. So you being a CEO or you living in Sandton isn't a comparative value to anyone else. That's not necessarily something that's going to weigh out against anyone else. But secondly, even if this is true, two things. One, your success can be marginal and gradual in its nature. So it can look like successful jumps. So you going to your dream college, then getting that junior managing job, then you becoming a CEO. But two, the actual impact of this response, which was never actually made, was to say that individuals are likely to feel burnout because they're working so hard. That is something that we can mitigate at the point at which you have more money or you're actually happy doing your job, because at the point at which then you can do things like take leisure, you can do things like take paid leave. With that strategy done, first question on which side is better for individuals' happiness. What did they tell you on their side? They told you that individuals are likely to access a better lifestyle. They're likely to access a lifestyle that they can opt into. Individuals are going to feel happier. They then give you an argument as to why individuals are going to be more happy. They then give you an extension on why individuals are likely to be less disappointed. These are all reliant on the very same premise, that individuals on their side are likely going to be happier because they can access these things. Let's note, at the top of this rebuttal, I want to frame something that's really important. Sure, on both sides of the debate, we can agree that barriers exist, but there can be actions taken to decrease those barriers. We think we're more likely to have those on our side because of two reasons. One, when you have a blanket narrative that forces individuals to surpass that average nature, you're likely then going to create a mobility. You're likely going to have solidarity that forces individuals to do better. So it looks like a group of women in a corporate space sector looking to do better and to implement better policies in that regard. But two, there have been structural adaptations on the rise in order to include poor individuals. So the idea that you just won't have poor people escape poverty just isn't actually true, because you have things like affirmative action on the rise, you have things of that sort. But even if it is true that they on their side make individuals happier, they are far worse for those individuals because there's less individuals taking opportunity by virtue of the fact that they don't want to be a significant failure or a significant success. So when you don't have individuals breaking those barriers and getting into new positions, you're likely going to be worse for the very same issues they're talking about. What did we tell you on our side? We gave you an argument as to why you're likely to better the quality of life for people, because one, you have the increased pursuit of bigger things, but two, you incentivize the creation of uplifting structures. This argument panel was paramount in debate ending, because on both sides of the debate, we are talking about individuals and people. We show you how we're better for something that's especially important to those individuals. We're proving our burden in that regard. We then gave you an argument in a mere speech to say that we're likely to maximize autonomy because people can explore different jobs. We then secondly told you that people are likely to be able to reach goals that surpass the average lifestyle. On the web, I'm going to deal with two worst cases here. The first worst case we have on opposition is a world where people aren't happy. Why do we still weigh out? One, disappointment is something that isn't static in its nature. It's not long-lasting. So sure, you didn't get that job application today, but that's not something you're going to be upset about 20 years down the line. But two, on our side, as I showed you in strategy, we can glorify the process. So we can glorify the failure that you experience, and that's going to inspire you to get back up again. But thirdly, on their side, you don't have disappointment, you have regret. And that is something that is comparatively far, far worse, because you never took that opportunity, you never actually stood up to take that chance. That's worse. The second worst case I want to deal with here is the worst case in which we have worst relationships on our side. I'm directly dealing with Laura's responses and the argument we get from Amara. Why do worst relationships something that we can still weigh out on? Two reasons. One, because you don't have to have friends in your workplace. Me being a debater doesn't mean I have to have debating friends. You can have friends elsewhere. But two, relationships aren't static in their nature. Relationships can change. So you might hate your coworker today, but you might change offices and then have a better relationship with them in the future. So last question then on minorities. What did we tell you in this question? We told you that we're likely to be better for minorities because of two reasons. The first is because you're likely to increase pressure on oppressive systems. So think about in the 1980s when you had the sense of expectation for immigrant workers to be earning more. That meant then that they were able to do things like unionize because they weren't okay with just getting by and living average lifestyles. But two, we are likely to have sympathy for lower class individuals. What did they tell you on their side in response? They tell you that a large influence isn't needed. Two responses. One, you having a larger influence means you just have an increased capacity to actually deal with social change. You have more money, you can do things like contribute to social movements. But two, you're likely to be breaking into spaces and to have things like integration and breaking things like that ideological equality in that regard. So weigh out on minorities as well. Parktown's mediocrity push allows for minorities to not shimmer and shine.
We'd like to thank the reply speaker from opposition and the third speaker from opposition. I'd like to call on the reply speaker, Amir.
Okay, cool. Am I audible like this? Two major strategic issues from the proposition bench. Firstly, I want to know that on our side, we can still glorify the pursuit to success for two reasons. One, because in order to effectively glorify success, you need to show what failure people overcame and how they successfully overcame different barriers, which led to them being successful in the first place. Laura says this undermines our case because we're glorifying failures, which means we can no longer get our benefits. That's false. We aren't glorifying failures, we're glorifying your ability to overcome those failures and successfully persevere through those failures. But so the second reason why this is true is because actual successful people have empirically used their platforms to speak about past struggles and things that they have overcame. So it looks like Kendrick Lamar speaking about how he got kicked out of his house at like a young age by his parents, things like that. Second strategic flaw. They try and say that success can't be subjective on our side. We think that that's a false premise because each individual's pursuit of success is always going to be different. So for them to say that, oh no, it's going to be an objective standard, we think that that's false because each individual's pursuit of success is like inherently different and you always have different experiences, but moreover, actual successful people exist on a spectrum. On the first clash then, on the principle, they tell us we're extremely inaccessible. Conversely, we gave you an argument on why we're better for minorities and better for creating social change to make things more accessible. On the way up, let's evaluate this. In our worst case, success is highly inaccessible. 3 reasons why we're still better. 1, it's okay, because on our side, we're comparatively better for creating social change. Laura tries to dispute this by saying that the needs of like poor people are subjective, therefore you aren't going to oppose actual systems. Although needs might be subjective, you're still going to be opposing the same oppressive structures. So one person might be poor, another person might have a different problem, but the same oppressive structures are causing you to be in that position. But secondly, even though the success might not be attainable, we think that the smaller achievements you earn on your pursuit to success is something that's still valuable. So sure, you might not become the CEO on our side, but your pursuit to become the CEO allows you to get additional benefits like an increased salary. Maybe you aren't the CEO, you're the senior manager, but that's still something that's incredibly valuable. They never show us why those smaller achievements that you achieve on your pursuit to success is a good thing. Thirdly, their side makes people complicit in oppression, and we think that on a principle level, that's just completely wrong. I showed you why in my speech. Notice how they don't respond to any of that, nor do they respond to any of the arguments about minorities creating social change. We win on that clash. Final clash then on improving people's lives. In our worst case, people will constantly chase happiness like they claim, but we think that's good for 2 reasons. 1, the pursuit of happiness is good because on props side, life just becomes mundane. If you settle at a mediocre life, you can no longer pursue new things within your life, and that's something that's incredibly harmful to people's happiness. But secondly, if you stop at mediocrity, you're likely to prevent yourself from pursuing goals that exist outside of mediocrity. And that's to say that oftentimes certain goals that people have just require a lot of resources. So if you want to have a big family and live in a farm, you need more than the average salary to achieve that goal. On their side, people's goals outside of mediocrity cannot be achieved, meaning when it comes to happiness, their side is comparatively better. A mediocre lifestyle is terrible, but Proposition's case is even more mediocre. Thank you.
Thank you to the reply speaker from opposition. To close the debate, we'd like to call on the reply speaker from proposition, Amara.
I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The glaring strategic issue that is costing CARES this debate is that they don't understand what success is and how it plays out in the glorification. We think success, even as much as they try and make it into this perfect world, it isn't what individuals want. It's what on a blanketed level people want and think of success. That looks like getting the top marks in your grade, getting into that hard job, that kind of thing. This is things that the rich determine. Laura told you that this is exclusive people. This is the elite. We think that at the point where they didn't refute this in third, from after Laura said, it's the point that they concede with our case. At the point where all of their matters hinged on this idea that you can control your success and you can control how the glorification plays out is when they lose this debate. 2 clashes then to prove that we're winning. 1, in terms of minorities, and then 2 in terms of happiness. I'll start with the second one. We think that this is the only certain impact in this debate. It's very important because success is dependent on many different factors. That is dependent on your ability to access resource. That is dependent on your health. That is dependent on so many other things that aren't on your control, in your control. But happiness is. Happiness is something that you can choose to do. But secondly, it's important because it affects everything. It affects the way that you engage with society. It affects the way that you live your life. If you live a good life, you can choose to live a good life. You can choose to live a content life. That is the only certain in this debate, and I think that that in itself is debate winning. Third thing then, so we're going to prove to win this debate, is the chat on minorities. 4 points under this. 1, we think that we explained people's different ideas or drives for success. We think that there's 2 differences. 1, there's a difference between the ability to succeed and the different to have to succeed, because they're driven by different motivations. Because if you feel like you have the ability to succeed, that's driven from people within themselves that feel like they can succeed, that feel like they want to succeed. That's things that are within. But the feeling that you have to succeed, that's determined on external factors. That's allowing other people and society to dictate and tell you what you have to do. We think that that is unfair on their side. Secondly, because we think that they don't engage with the fact that people are unlikely to be successful. No, they just blue ticked my whole case. But even if they didn't, we think that the pressure to do these things that have minimal slots of entry is something that means that it's unlikely to be representative or successful for people, because only one person can come first in the grade. Only one team can win this debate. But thirdly, because on our side, you don't have to be successful. You can be what you want to succeed. You don't have to be mediocre. If you have that internal drive, you can do that. But we think that what we do uniquely on our side is we have a messaging that takes down things like hustle culture, that takes away these toxic narratives and causes people to engage the way that they want to. The average person lives a mediocre life in our world, and we think that it's fine to show them as that okay. But fourthly, we think that there's a cop-out on their side for institutions, because they feel like they don't have to help people, because the success of people is based on themselves, because all of these problems exist, but it's fine because people can overcome and have their own goals and succeed in that sense. We think, panel, we're the only team that understands the human psyche. We're the only team that understands that the reason why happiness is the first thing in the American Constitution or the Bill of Rights is because it's fundamental to people. We think that minorities ought to be protected. We think that we can't glorify something that doesn't cater for the minority of people. Proud to propose.
Thank you to both teams for a great debate. You may cross the floor, shake hands. Once all the results have been tabulated, accumulated, all the stuff, the award ceremony will begin in this venue, let's say at 5:30.
Did they come?